bees kind of are flying in wobbly shape, it means that it's carrying pollen inside the bee. So we know that that bee is going towards the hive. So when we track the bee, we're trying to see the wobbly line. Straight line, we know it's going out. And wobbly line, we know it's going back to the hive. So we go towards the wobbly line.
And when you're talking about the lines, you mean their path that they're flying to the hive. So they're flying in a kind of wobbly way.
Slower than when they're flying out, very straight.
There are also some piles of stones slightly below the green glass. Why have you included those in the piece?
The stacking stone is a gesture that you will see from the elder when we finish taking the honey in the forest. He was stacking the stone back for the bees to come back. So according to him, bees like somewhere darker and dry, and so to stack the stone bags, it's kind of like protecting the space of the wild bees. And so for me, this gesture, this action is very important to be reenact.
The installation is going to open in a couple of hours. What do you still need to do?
Well, I still need to get some more rocks to stack on the in this little display area outside of the office. Should we go get some more rocks by the lake?
I'd love to come and see where you're finding them and be part of that process. What's the process called?
Bahada, stacking stone.
We grab our coats and head out of the huge industrial doors at the back of the gallery to the shore of Lake Zurich. From here, you can see the snow-capped Alps in the distance. We're just right at the edge of this lake, and there are pebbles and smooth stones of lots of different sizes. Let me help you. That's a nice smooth one.
Seems like all the water here is so clean.
It looks like you could drink it, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you cannot drink tap water in Taiwan. Yeah, I think here you can tap water.
There's a lovely one with a stripe through the middle of it. It's grey with a sort of crack of white. The edge of the water's so lovely because it's just got the odd yellow leaf that's fallen down onto the pebbles. Oh, the swan's come to see us. Hello. Oh. He's curious for what we're doing, isn't he? Puffing up his wings. Slightly territorial about this space. He's following us. We're being followed by a swan, Anchi.
Don't take my stone.
Escaping the swan, we go back inside the gallery so Anchi can start stacking the stones we've collected.
So now they are all quite nice and clean and dry and still a bit damp, but it's okay. I'm going to stack them back to the outside display area. So let's see. There's a crease for the bee.
There are quite a lot actually, aren't there? There must be about 50. And then overall there must be 100 in the end. While you're stacking the stones, there's a tour going on around some of the other installations, and some tables are being put out for the opening tonight, so it's quite a flurry of activity going on around us. Do you feel like it's ready now for the opening?
I think it's completely ready for the opening, which will happen in 1 hour.
As guests arrive for the opening of the exhibition, there's a lovely warm atmosphere around us. And she reflects on how it feels to share this installation with an audience miles from the mountains of Taiwan.
For me, the story of Temahakoi is so important. It's an invisible kind of cultural heritage to me. I know I'm doing contemporary art, but at the same time for me, I want to include our gestures and our worldview, and also like for me the most important thing is to let people know, not just Taiwan, like to know this space exists and we exist as queer people.
You've been listening to the documentary In the Studio from the BBC World Service with the indigenous Taipei-based artist An Chi Lin, who's also known by her Atayal name Chibas Tahos. It's presented and produced by me, Lucy Collingwood. The executive producer is Andrea Kidd.
This is the BBC World Service with the story of the Nazis' attempt to wipe out the Romani people. What started as persecution became a genocide by the end of the Second World War. But what happened is much less known than the Jewish Holocaust. Survivors, activists, and historians have been fighting to be heard. The Romani Holocaust, an unfinished history. Saturday at 11 GMT. At bbcworldservice.com, World Questions.
Mongolia sits between two mighty neighbours, a young democracy sandwiched between Russia and China. Challenge walks hand in hand with opportunity for Mongolia. Our debate with a public audience at the panel of leading Mongolians starts here.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC World Service with Victoria Wahunda and Rob Young.
Coming up, Donald Trump has appeared in public for the first time since an attempt on his life 2 days ago with a large white bandage on his right ear.
As he walked in front of his supporters, he was given a rapturous welcome and was officially nominated as the Republican Party's candidate for the presidential election in November.
Meanwhile, Mr. Trump named a 39-year-old Senator of Ohio, J.D. Vance, to be his running mate. We'll bring you the latest on what's been happening at the Republican National Convention.
And we'll get an update on the investigation into the man who shot Donald Trump on Saturday.
Also this half-hour, Mabu Forest in northern Mozambique, the largest piece of rainforest in southern Africa, is to become a conservation area. All that and more, but first, the latest BBC World News.
This is Danielle Yarowiecka with the BBC News. Hello. Donald Trump has been given a rapturous welcome by Republican lawmakers and activists on the opening day of their convention in Wisconsin. Walking on stage with a prominent white bandage on his right ear, Mr. Trump greeted his supporters with the fist pumps he used moments after the failed assassination attempt. The audience chanted back the words he uttered on Saturday, "Fight, fight, fight." Mr. Trump also greeted the man he's named as his vice presidential candidate, the 39-year-old Senator J.D. Vance. These delegates said his inspirational biography, military service, and dedication to America's working families would appeal to voters of all backgrounds.
He's very educated, but he's very much a common man. I think that's important too because he reaches across to everyone in America.
He's young, he's a veteran.
I think his youth is definitely going to be a compliment. He's a young guy, he's energetic, he has charisma, and he has a proven track record on top of it. So I think that is a perfect mix for President Trump.
Our correspondent Nomia Iqbal is at the convention in Milwaukee and said that despite the early predictions, Mr. Vance is not an obvious choice for the nomination.
It is a surprising choice in some ways. Look, in the last few days, the momentum had really been behind J.D. Vance, so it wasn't a surprise in that respect. But from an electoral standpoint, you could argue that J.D. Vance doesn't really bring a lot to the ticket. So he's the senator for Ohio. Ohio is pretty much in Donald Trump's corner. J.D. Vance already represents those voters who are the very sort of loyal part of Donald Trump's base. And there's an argument to say that Donald Trump could have chosen someone that would have opened his base geographically. He could have chosen someone that helped him get moderate voters, and that would have been someone to help make inroads for Republicans.
President Biden, in an interview with NBC, has confirmed he will participate in an already agreed second debate with Mr. Trump, despite his disastrous performance in the first one. It will take place in September, and Mr. Biden said he could perform better this time around. The authorities in Mozambique say they will designate the largest piece of rainforest in southern Africa a conservation area. The Mabu forest in northern Mozambique is what's known as Sky Island. Jonah Fisher has more details.
Mabu is a forest perched on top of a mountain. That means that many of its inhabitants have evolved in isolation. Expeditions have found new species of chameleon, snake, bats and butterfly. And on a recent trip, we saw possible discoveries of fish and dung beetle too. The Mozambique authorities are now taking action. They told the BBC that Mabu would be turned into a conservation area, which allows the local community to use it for firewood, but protects it from mining and logging.
World News on the BBC. Two new studies have found that emissions of three potent greenhouse gases have risen sharply in China over the past decade. All three are perfluorocarbons, which are more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide and linger for tens of thousands of years. They're used in the manufacture of semiconductors and televisions and are also byproducts of the smelting of aluminium. A major security operation is underway in Indian-administered Kashmir after at least 4 soldiers were killed during a gun battle with militants in the latest eruption of violence in the disputed region. The army said troops had come under fire whilst carrying out a search in the Doda district. Reports in Seoul say a senior North Korean diplomat defected with his family last November. Ri Il-gyu was serving as a counselor responsible for political affairs at Pyongyang's embassy in Cuba. In an interview with a South Korean newspaper, Ri Il-gyu said he'd become disillusioned with the regime. He's the first high-profile defector from the north since 2016. Initial results indicate Paul Kagame is on course to be re-elected president of Rwanda with about 99% of the votes. Our Africa editor Richard Hamilton has more details.
Paul Kagame has been Rwanda's de facto leader since the end of the 1994 genocide and the country's president since the year 2000. Only 2 opposition candidates were allowed to run against him this time after the Electoral Commission, at the request of the government, banned his most prominent critics. Human rights groups frequently accuse his government of stifling the media and political opposition with arbitrary detentions, assassinations and disappearances. It's also facing allegations of encouraging instability in neighbouring Democratic Republic of Congo.
BBC News.
Thank you so much for that news. Hello there and welcome to Newsday here on the BBC World Service with Robian and Victoria. Thank you so much for joining us. Much of this first half hour will be on one main story, the Republican National Convention in the United States, where former President Donald Trump made his first public appearance just days of an attempt to assassinate him. We'll bring you the very latest from there. George Addo will also be here with the sports news, as will Mary Boy with the top business headline as well.
Let's start in the United States. Donald Trump has made an emotional appearance at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin, and his surprise arrival was greeted by delegates with delight. Visibly emotional, a large white bandage over his white beard, and those words, fight, 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 were what he said to the crowd just seconds after he was shot on Saturday. Well, Mr. Trump ended up being a focal point of the evening, but perhaps the wider political significance was his choice of running mate and vice presidential candidate.
The question is on the motion that Senator J.D. Vance be nominated by acclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
In that moment, J.D. Vance, a 39-year-old senator from Ohio with less than 2 years standing in that job, has become Donald Trump's running mate. He's a former U.S. Marine, a businessman, and an author who once described himself as a never-Trumper, who you spoken to Donald Trump since the assassination attempt?
We spoke on the phone for a couple of minutes, and then I met with staff. He sounded great. He was focused on, really, he was, first thing he talked about was the victim and how his heart went out to the victim and those two that were fighting for their lives in critical condition. And then he immediately started talking about his vice presidential pick and how he was leaning toward Vance at the time. Like I said, we spoke yesterday, and he was going through the reasons why Vance was the reason why he was thinking about picking him. And obviously Vance speaks, I think, very, very well to so many of those people in the Rust Belt that have, maybe it's a different states than it was when they were growing up.
We've seen Donald Trump arrive at the Republican National Convention with that large white bandage on his right ear. You know him incredibly well. How do you think he looks?
I think he looks good. I mean, considering we're, just over 48 hours from an assassination attempt that a millimeter to the right, would have taken his life. I think he looks very good. I'm sure that there might have to be a little surgery on that ear, but from everything that I could tell, he's got his hearing, and thank goodness, he's not in the hospital, and it's a situation where it obviously could have been so much worse for the president and for the country. So I think the angels were with Donald Trump on Saturday, to be perfectly honest.
You were his special assistant, so you spent an awful lot of time with him, knowing him incredibly well. What kind of impact do you think the attempted assassination has had on him mentally, has had on how he views what he wants to do with the rest of his life?
It's a great question, and I probably will be able to answer that better over the coming weeks and months as you see it more and more. But I do think the immediate aftermath is perspective. Right, it immediately, gives you a perspective that, hey, life is fleeting, and you need to focus the moments on exactly what you want to do. I think when he said he wants to be more of a uniter, I really believe that's in his heart. That's something that he really wants to be at this point. And I think you're going to see a little bit of a different tone in his speech on Thursday night, and maybe originally would have happened had there not been an assassination attempt.
Do you think this talk of unity, of trying to bring the country together, will wrap the reality of a general election campaign where they are by their very nature divisive, and a lot of the language from both sides, but from Donald Trump included, is often aggressive about the political opponent. It's often saying the stakes could not be higher and the other person is beyond the pale, and that's why you must vote for me.
Yeah, and to that point, we're just a few days from Joe Biden saying that Donald Trump, we need to put Donald Trump in the bullseye.
And he said
he did, but he was a little bit, he wasn't as unequivocal as I would like him to be with Lester Holt when he did answer that question. Originally he said something else, and then he didn't, and he kind of deflected rather than taking full blame for it. But with that being said, look, I am okay if there is strong discussion and debate, and even if it does get heated from a verbal standpoint when you're doing this. But the whole idea of the First Amendment is there needs to be a safe public square in order to do that. And I think that's the key point. And for me, I think the biggest thing is we need answers to what happened on Saturday, so that way we can make sure that the public square is safe, so that way there can be vigorous debate between the candidates. But that means that we need to see what happened with these security failures, how somebody got 125 meters away when the longest sniper shots ever made were 30 times the distance of that.
Yeah, Joe Biden's just ordered the Secret Service to provide him with protection as well. He's also a presidential candidate.
It's good. It's about time.
Why do you think J.D. Vance is the best person out of all of the Republicans there are in the United States to potentially be the vice president?
Well, I think it was a difficult decision for President Trump. If you look at his statement, I think he does a good job of embodying that. the best that he could. I know that I've been in many conversations with him as well as senior staff there in talking about the pros and cons of over a dozen different potential candidates. So it wasn't a clear-cut choice. I think there could have been other very good choices as well. But I think when you go and you look at the mathematics of the electoral map and you realize that this race will come down to about 9 states, I think J.D. Vance helps him in 3 of those 9 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I think that was the determining factor. And by the way, J.D. Vance was able to, I think, speak to Americans in a way that Donald Trump was in terms of far before they ever got into the political realm. They were able to capture the American imagination in very different ways, right? If you read Hillbilly Elegy, it's very different than The Apprentice, but they were able to capture the American attention outside of politics. And I think there's a respect from President Trump to J.D. Vance because of that.
When you say there was respect, I'm interested in Donald Trump's ability to forgive previous comments, because J.D. Vance had at one point described Donald Trump as an idiot. He said he was reprehensible, and apparently in private compared him to Adolf Hitler. Donald Trump's forgiven him.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fallacies that many have told about Donald Trump in the media over the past 10 years or so, is that Donald Trump is somebody who doesn't forgive. I've seen this time and time again where President Trump is willing to forgive, is willing to actually do what's best for the country or for policy or something like that. I just go back to his speech with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi in the Oval Office. He had hosted them numerous times. I remember one night them even having Chinese food, I think in 2018 together, after having vigorously called each other names and all that stuff. So Donald Trump has an ability to forgive. I know there's kind of this narrative out there that he doesn't, but I think if you look at the facts of it, he does.
And would you guys have former special assistant to Donald Trump?
Meanwhile, the investigation into the 20th Trump assassination of Trump continues. The FBI is treating the shooting as an act of terrorism, but what yet isn't understood, and the question everyone wants to know, is the motive behind this act of violence. Those who knew Thomas Michael Crooks say and describe him as a nerd. The FBI says they've already interviewed more than 100 people, and on Monday they announced that it had gained access to his phone. The shooter's notoriety has also put a spotlight on his hometown of Bethel Park, on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A local councillor, Dan Grisbeck, told our correspondent Emma Vardy that it's common for people in Bethel Park to own guns. From there, she sent us this report.
What was in the mind of this young man is still unknown.
Thomas Crooks.
He graduated from high school 2 years ago, said to be good at maths, and later worked as an assistant at a nursing home. Now the eyes of the international media are on the house where Thomas Crooks lived. Kelly was one of a number of neighbours evacuated as police investigated a suspicious device at his home.
We were overrun with law enforcement agents from literally everywhere and giving no explanation.
And your neighbour, what was he like?
He would just avidly walk the neighborhood, and he always had on like these style headphones, and kind of seems like your average American dorky young man.
At just 20 years old, this would have been the first presidential election that Thomas Crooks was old enough to vote in. And there are many unanswered questions as to why he left this quiet neighborhood and came inches away from killing Donald Trump. What we do know is that Thomas Crooks was a member of this gun club, which has condemned what it called the senseless violence. How typical is it for people to own guns in this area?
Yeah, hunting is something that's really typical in Western Pennsylvania, and I think belonging to a gun club, having something like a rifle team, like Bethel Park has, honing your craft and being a better shot is pretty typical throughout Western Pennsylvania for gun owners.
When Thomas Crooks died shot by the Secret Service, he was wearing a t-shirt, the merchandise of a popular YouTuber who creates glamorized gun content for millions of subscribers. Now the FBI is trawling through Thomas Crooks' life, his mobile phone and online activity to try to understand the beliefs and motivations of the young man who's changed the course of this election.
Our attacks on an Imabadi billboard.
And we'll be returning to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and events at the Republican National Convention a bit later on in the program. But now we're going to get all your sports headlines. George Daniels here. Hi, George.
Hello, Rob. Let's begin with football and head of the Colombian Football Federation, Ronald Bachun and his son, have been arrested following a brawl at Sunday's Copa America final in Miami. Both were held on charges of battery involving an official or an employee that relates to the brawl at the stadium after Colombia lost Argentina 1-0 in extra time. Meanwhile, Maryland County in Florida will review security protocol for the 2026 World Cup after more than 2,000 fans were arrested at Sunday's Copa America final, capping a tournament strike with the score. Now, Bulls head coach Gary O'Neill says Han Hee-chan was racially abused during a friendly match with Italian club Como. O'Neill says that he opted to handle the game, but the South Korean international one said he was preparing to finish the match, which they won 1-0. And Chinese swimmers taking part in Olympic Games in Paris for the drug tested twice as much as some other nations. European authorities have come under pressure in recent months after the next 23 swimmers tested positive for advanced substance and were cleared to compete at the Tokyo Games. And Joaquin Pao won that for his bid for another Olympic medal at the Paris Games for the doubles win at the British Open in the start as the Spaniard returned to competition for the first time since last week's sport.
Thanks very much, George. In fact, George is talking about the Copa America final where some video images from the BBC website of the complete chaos that appears in the Rock Stadium. And we'll get more sport with George in about half an hour's time. You're with Newsday on the BBC website.
And that's where we leave the World Service here on BBC Radio 4. Good morning, I'm Caroline Nichols. There's news and weather coming up, and how school children from towns have been learning what it's like to live and work in remote moorland. First, a look ahead to this Saturday when we're commemorating an iconic songwriter.
On BBC Radio 4. And then woken up one day being a pop star. What can her music tell us about the life of Sinead O'Connor? It was a very unhappy relationship leaving the pop star world. I'm Joe Wiley, and to commemorate a year since her death, I'll be looking back on Sinead O'Connor's legacy using her music, interviews, and the BBC Radio archives.
Beautifully emotional, beautifully articulate.
Maybe we could read from what she was singing.
Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Now on Radio 4, here's Chris Fawkes.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Good morning. And now the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, day 505 on Tuesday the 16th of July 2024. The General Sleeps to 7 guys. Hello, England.
Psychotherapists, I'm not quite sure what the appropriate job would be. The pupil can focus on a task for longer than 5 minutes. Their mind just can't seem to focus on my teaching at all. It's unlikely the pupil will last in mainstream school. Is affecting my life because the pupil has made this year horrible to teach for me, from Anonymous. I would imagine that would be intolerable. I will take my online test, but only if we run out of callers and people send me this message about it. I'd much rather hear from you. Denise. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
What's your experience of ADHD?
Hi.
Is it a thing?
It is. Decades ago, I used to bring home a friend of my daughter's, who's also the daughter of my friend. I used to bring her home from school. She had ADHD. It did not improve her life. It made school hell. She couldn't really communicate with many other children if they didn't understand her. She couldn't really cope in class unless she
When you
had
say
the
they couldn't,
medication.
sorry to interrupt, but when you say they couldn't understand her, why couldn't they?
Well, because if she needed her medication, she couldn't speak properly. It affected her ability to speak. Now, I used to give this child her meds at 6 o'clock in the evening. But by 5:30, she could not, she was a clever kid, but she couldn't string words together coherently. That makes life hard. That is not a game. That is not somebody who wants attention. That is a child who is trying to say to you, please may I have a glass of water, Auntie, but they can't get the words out. It's just not happening. Because 15 words are maybe in their head when they just want one, water, but they can't do it. And so when I hear people who use this as an excuse for bad behaviour, I do get upset. And when I hear people say that this doesn't exist, I do get upset because I saw it in this child. I've known her since she was 3 years old. I've known her entire life. It is real. And it is agony for those who go through it. It is agony for teachers. It is agony for family members who just can't.
Did she have medication for it, Denise?
She had medication,
Did it work?
yes. Yes, it did. And I saw this because I was giving her medication at 6 o'clock. By 5:30, that child could not speak to me. By 6:20, she got it at 6. By 6:20, she was a coherent child again.
Right.
And if I can tell you, that makes a difference. Can she go to a youth club? You can't speak properly? No, you can't. You can't mix with other children. You can't communicate. It destroys your social life and ability. You can't have it. School lessons. You don't do that very often. You can't have a piano lesson. They become shut down. They become it's frustrating and that causes the anger. But please don't think that doesn't exist for a lot of people. It's an excuse. But for those whom it is real, it is agony.
I can imagine. Denise, thank you. That's why I don't think I've necessarily been diagnosed with it because it's not agony at all. It's, Look, let me read you some of the questions that you will be asked. Now, this is not the official one what we're talking about because that's not available unless you presumably see your GP. I'm not professional. I seek professional help. However, this is a quick ADHD test from Clinical Partners. Question 1. I find it difficult finishing a task or project. Never, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. I find it difficult finishing a task or project. Really? Sometimes? Sometimes. Let's put in sometimes, okay? Click. Question 2. I find it difficult to organise myself or a task. Can I find it difficult? Tasks. Again, sometimes. I find it difficult to remember appointments. That's all right. Yeah, that's awesome. Question 4. Question 4. If a task or project requires a lot of thought, I will often delay in getting it started. Where's my chair? What, sorry? The chair that I haven't built for 9 months. Yeah, you're right actually. You know that gaming chair that I've got? So it feels like I'm actually in a NASCAR, not actually just pretending I'm in one. So I've got the steering wheel, the seat, the pedals, the gear stick, still in a box after 4 months. That's because I'm daunted by the task. It's nothing to do with just putting it off. It's just I've got 4 or 5 packages at home I still haven't opened. Am I putting it off because of ADHD, or am I just slightly daunted by the fact I'm not technical and I don't know how to thread a speedometer cable into my cable's bicycle? See what I mean? I had trouble switching the blooming seat. That took me 4 hours. Question 5. I find it difficult to sit still and often fidget or squirm. Alright. Question 6. I would describe myself as being on the go and feel compelled to do things as if driven by a motor. No. Doing breakfast radio, of course you're going to be kind of thing, but when I get home, I'm not like, oh, I'm going to do it. Question 7. I find it hard to remain focused in group settings. That's the thing, it's concentration. My mind feels very cluttered and it's hard for me to concentrate on one thing at a time. No, that's not true. It's cluttered in the morning, it's cluttered. You only see me when I'm doing this, when my brain's fizzing. But you'd be amazed how boring I am when I go home. Have you ever worked with someone who literally can never turn off? I used to work with Colin Murray. He now has worked for the BBC, done so for many years. Northern Irish boy, big into his sport, big into his music, Radio 1, etc. And I remember doing the 2012 Summer Olympics with Colin. And I said to him, do you have an off switch? Did you have an off switch? And he was like, only when I'm asleep. I said, do you find it even asleep? No, he said, it's fine. It was just like the whole time. We wouldn't just speak, because Me and Anna Foster, who's now reading the news on television for the BBC brilliantly, after being a fantastic foreign correspondent in Turkey and Middle East, she's now reading the news, and she and I were doing the digital version of the Olympics, so we could do all sorts of things when we were on an alternative radio station for the BBC, and we would finish our shift and we'd look at each other and we'd be absolutely shattered, and we'd get on the bus to get back to the hotel where we were staying, and we'd sort of nod off, and Colin would be still going. Stop it! I'm going crazy! Who's the other person who was just like that? There was one other person, Johnny Vaughan. Johnny Vaughan was the same, from Radio X. Oh my God, never stops. Never stops, amazing. Sorry. My mind feels very cluttered and it's hard for me to concentrate on one thing at a time. No, I can do that. No, I can do that. If I'm watching a film, I'm not thinking, I'm going to watch another film. Although, no. I make decisions quickly and fail to think through the consequences sometimes. That's definitely a thing. And question 10, I'm often irritable with a short fuse. Never. No. Only if I'm absolutely off my... Question 11, I have mood swings, sometimes feel quite high, other times low. Well, it used to be like that, but now that's bipolar. So now it's rarely. Oh, and question 12. I often miss what is being said to me in conversations. That's definitely an often. Alright. Your results are not consistent with ADHD. There we go. Low to medium probability. You see, I've got 20. What? Low to medium probability. What should I do now? Your answer suggests you are not showing many signs of ADHD. However, because it's doctors and lawyers, they can never give you a definitive answer. This is only a very short test and there are other components to a proper diagnosis. So there we are. ADHD. Is it a thing? Apparently it is. I want you to convince me and others who think that it's a bit of a kind of, tell us what it's like. You're Wrong About ADHD is fronted by classic FM presenters and longtime friends Katie Brethwick and Sam Pittis. They are. You're Wrong About ADHD. I'll do the newspaper and LBC headlines after the news because I'm conscious I'm always late. It's 5:30. Here are the headlines with Amelia Cox.
Donald Trump has made his first public appearance since surviving an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. Delegates cheered as he appeared on screen backstage at the Republican National Convention with a bandage over his right ear. President Biden has admitted it was a mistake to use the term "in the bullseye" when referring to Donald Trump. He said to have made the comment in the days before the attempt on the former president's life. But a children's prison has been branded the most violent detention centre in the country by a watchdog. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says he's very concerned at how much Feltham A Young Offenders Institution has deteriorated. LBC weather, cloudy to start with some rain in the east, sunny spells for many from the west. Some scattered showers will also develop, these heavy in the east, highs of 21 degrees.
This is LBC.
I'm Susan Tanner from the Darwood & Tanner Dental Practice, a specialist in prosthodontics. I love working with dental implants to help patients with missing teeth regain their smile and their confidence. If you're choosing dental implants, our team will be experts who will be by your side for the whole journey.
From gum care to dental implants, Darwood & Tanner, celebrating 30 years at the forefront of world-class dentistry.
To find out more and meet our team, start at Darwood.
Was a mistake to use. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on it. Focus on what he's doing.
The government has launched what it called a root and branch review of the armed forces. It says the Strategic Defence Review will assess the threats from international conflicts and cyber attacks and report back next year. It will be carried out by the former Secretary-General of NATO, Lord Robertson. The family of the teenager Jay Slater, who disappeared in Tenerife 4 weeks ago, are waiting for the results of a post-mortem examination after the discovery of a body on the island. Spanish police say all evidence suggests the remains are those of the 19-year-old from Lancashire, but a formal identification and cause of death has not yet been confirmed. Our correspondent Fiona Trott says his family want to know why the search took so long.
We're told that the body was found in a very inaccessible part of the island, close to the site of Jay's mobile phone's last location, we understand. We saw teams in that area 3 weeks ago. Why did this take so long? Was it the challenge
Prisons Watchdog has branded a young offenders institution as more violent than any adult jail. The Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, said he was very concerned at the levels of violence and increasing self-harm at Belton A in West London, which holds young people between the ages of 15 and 18. The Ministry of Justice spokesperson said the Governor and frontline staff were making every effort to drive improvements. The largest piece of rainforest in southern Africa, first identified by scientists 20 years ago, is to become a conservation area. Marble Forest in northern Mozambique is what's known as a sky island, perched on top of a mountain. Its wildlife has developed in isolation, so it's home to unique species of chameleons, snakes, bats and butterflies. Now Chris Hawkes is back with today's weather.
Thanks a lot, Caroline, and we've seen more heavy rain over the last 24 hours thanks to a slow-moving area of low pressure. And that's dumped 30 millimetres of rain in Nottingham. It's still raining here at the moment, so those totals will continue to tot up. The area of low pressure then initially with us this morning, and as far as the weather goes, for many of us this morning it's cloudy with the prospect of seeing some rain. The wettest weather from this weather front stretches across parts of Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, over the peaks and the Pennines into parts of the northwest Midlands, Wales, and a few showers into southwest England too. Across East Scotland and northeast England, meanwhile, there's a lot of low cloud with some mist patches and some areas of drizzle here. We've also got a few patches of rain working through the central belt of Scotland as well. For Northern Ireland, that's probably the place where you're more likely to see dry weather, but we start off on a cloudy note here. Now through the day there will be some developments in the weather. In that, the area of low pressure will slowly move out of the way and that will take the rain band with it. However, we are going to see sunny spells break through this afternoon, but also a few showers. Now there could be one or two showers working across Wales, the Midlands into southeast England, East Anglia. Those showers shouldn't cause too much of an issue, they will move through with time. However, across parts of northern England and into Scotland, we do have the forecast for some very slow-moving, heavy and thundery showers, covering 30-odd millimetres of rain over a couple of hours, so the threat of some localised flash flooding. Aside from that, there will be some spells of warm sunshine, probably a dry afternoon for southwest England, West Wales and Northern Ireland looking pretty decent all day. Top temperatures today generally between 18 and 21, a little below average, but feeling pleasant in the July sun. That's the latest, Caroline.
Thanks, Chris. Time now for a look at the papers. Donald Trump's pick for vice president was announced in time to make the lead in the Daily Telegraph. It describes J.D. Vance as a firebrand and an heir to the Make America Great Again movement. It notes he'd once been a fierce critic of Mr. Trump, what he called cultural heroin, but has since reinvented himself. The paper also points out Mr. Vance was one of those blaming Joe Biden's rhetoric for the attempted shooting of Mr. Trump on Saturday. The Times reports on new polling which puts the former president ahead of Joe Biden in 7 key battleground states. The data suggests that since March, Mr. Trump has overtaken his rival in 3 swing states and increased his lead in the others. It has, the advantage is expected to widen after the attempt on Mr. Trump's life. The Financial Times reports that shares in the group behind his social media site leapt more than 30% as traders reacted for the first time since the attack. Sir Keir Starmer's personal call to Donald Trump after the assassination attempt is covered by The Eye. It says Sir Keir overruled his advisers, who suggested sending a note instead. The paper says the call was quickly accepted and lasted 10 minutes, with Mr. Trump congratulating Sir Keir on becoming Prime Minister. The headline sees the conversation as a start in building their new special relationship. The Guardian quotes the head of the government's new defence review that the UK and its allies are facing a threat from the deadly quartet of China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary-General, said the UK had to be prepared to take on all 4 if necessary, as they were increasingly sharing arms components and military intelligence. Doctors are being told to warn patients about the dangers of climate change and look out for eco-distress, according to the Daily Mail. It describes the guidance issued by the Royal College of Physicians as controversial and says it tells doctors to raise the topic in consultations and to reduce their carbon footprint when working from home and cutting back prescriptions and tests. The Mail says there was an immediate backlash on the GP industry website, with warnings from some doctors it could result in misdiagnoses. The Guardian also carries a report that the climate crisis is making the length of each day longer as the melting of polar ice reshapes the planet. It explains that the scale is in milliseconds. It says that's enough to potentially disrupt internet traffic, financial transactions and GPS navigation, which rely on precise timekeeping. It says the melting ice distributed nearer the equator, making Earth fatter and slowing its rotation. Now business, the prospective new owner of Royal Mail has told the BBC he will not ditch the requirement to deliver letters throughout the UK 6 days a week. The details from Marika Roy.
In May, the board of the company that owns Royal Mail has agreed to a takeover offer from Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. In his first UK broadcast interview, Mr. Kretinsky has told the BBC's business editor, Simon Jack, he's committed to the so-called universal service obligation to deliver letters 6 days a week anywhere in the UK for the same price.
Never, and I can see very clearly one strong personal commitment. First of all, as long as I'm alive, I completely exclude this, and I say this in absolutely clear, unconditional commitment. Royal Mail is going to be the provider of universal service obligation unconditionally, and I would say forever.
Shareholders are expected to approve these. Resolves disputes between consumers and financial firms in the 12 months to the end of March. The Financial Ombudsman Service said complaints hadn't been higher in any other year over the past decade, except at the peak of the pandemic in 2020 to 2021. In the city, the 100 share index ended the day down 70 points at 8,183. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones closed 211 points higher at 40,212. In the wake of a failed assassination attempt, investors appear to expect a second Donald Trump presidency, which has raised hopes for a looser regulatory environment. And on the currency markets, the pound is trading at $1.29.6, and against the euro, sterling is at €1.19.0. That makes a euro worth 84.0 pence.
Sport now, here's a roundup from Matthew Nixon.
England women's manager Serena Wiegmann says it'll take Gareth Southgate a while to come to terms with losing the Euro 2024 final. Southgate's future remains up in the air following England's defeat to Spain in Berlin. Wiegmann's been speaking ahead of Lioness's Euro 2025 qualifying match on Tuesday against Sweden. Commenting Gothenburg will see the borders reach next summer's tournament automatically. In golf, the 2023 Open champion Brian Harman says it was sad to have to hand back the current job to the R&S hero after the 157th stage of golf's oldest championship. The American says his game is in great shape as he looks to defend his title at Royal Troon this week. Cam Norris through to the last 16 at the Swedish Open tennis after a straight set to win over Slovakia's Josef Kovalik. Norris could face Rafael Nadal in the next round. Nadal is through to the quarterfinals of the men's doubles after he won alongside Casper Ruud in his first appearance of the tournament in 2 months. And Michael van Gerwen's knocked out teenage sensation Luke Littler at the World Match Play Darts of Blackpool. The three-time champion beat Littler 10-6 in the opening round.
Finally, a glance back at some of the stories that were making news on the state in earlier years. In 2007, the UK announced that it would expel 4 Russian diplomats because of Moscow's refusal to extradite the suspect in the murder of Alexander Litvinenko. The former Russian agent was poisoned with a radioactive substance in London the year before. The suspect, denied involvement. The Foreign Secretary David Miliband told MPs it was vital for Britain to take a stand.
His murder put hundreds of others, residents and visitors, at risk of radiation contamination. And the UK government has a wider duty to ensure the safety of the large Russian community living in the UK.
Amazon officially opened for business as an online bookseller in 1995. In 1983, 20 people were killed when a helicopter travelling from Penzance to the Isles of Scilly came down in the Atlantic Ocean. Saddam Hussein became president of Iraq on this day in 1979. In 1969, the Apollo 11 space rocket took off from Florida at the start of the first attempt to land a man on the moon. On board were Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin. The US carried out the first test detonation of an atomic bomb as part of the Manhattan Project in 1945. In 1918, the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, was executed by the Bolsheviks, bringing to an end the Romanov dynasty. In 1228, Francis of Assisi was made a saint. The monastic order he founded is known for its work on behalf of the poor. And that's the end of News Briefing. Now on Radio 4, Prayer for the Day, presented by the Reverend Lynn Gibson.
Good morning. I'm just slightly too young to remember it, but it was on this day, the 16th of July, in 1969, that the Apollo 11 space rocket was launched from Cape Kennedy in Florida, at the beginning of what would be the first landing of man on the moon. It had taken years of planning and preparation, intense training and careful research, and the launch was watched by millions of people around the world. 4 days later, the world watched again, as Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon with those now famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Nowadays, space exploration has taken many huge leaps forward as funding and knowledge have permitted. I suspect that nothing will ever compare to that first moon landing, either for those who were involved or for those who watched with excitement around small black and white television screens around the world. That one giant leap for mankind demanded tremendous bravery and faith. The risks were largely unknown, and that first step onto the moon took immeasurable courage. The old Chinese proverb reminds us that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Every difficult venture, every adventure worth following, begins with a leap of faith. There are few of us who will be called to lunar landings. We all face challenges which cause us fear, and where the best way forward is with our hand in the hand of God. Lord, be our guide as we step out of faith, and lead us with certainty from darkness to the light of your presence. Amen.
Prayer for the Day was presented by the Reverend Lynn Gibson. Now on Radio 4, Farming Today with Anna Hill.
Good morning. A climate change think tank is urging the new government to enable farmers and landowners to pick up the pace to meet net zero emissions targets.
Now is the ideal time with the new government coming in who have a serious programme across the board on net zero to really sort of pick up the baton on farming and make the progress that we've not made over the last 10 or 15 years.
We'll hear more about that in just a moment. First though, every year in July, the call of the curlew finds itself competing with hoots of delight across the moors of northern England as hordes of children leave the classroom to learn about the upland landscape. The Let's Learn More, that's MOOR, events are coordinated by the regional moorland groups, BAFC and Countryside Learning, and they give thousands of primary school pupils the chance to meet people who work with the moorland flora and fauna. Helen Milliken visited one of this year's 8 learning locations, a remote stretch of moorland on the Raby estate in County Durham, while their classmates from Stevenson Way School in Newton Aycliffe were discovering the delights of tractors and all-terrain vehicles. Hunter and Regan told Helen about their standout moments from the day.
Definitely trying the food. It was kind of like a sausage roll. It had deer on the inside though. It was really nice.
I really like playing with the dogs. Oh wait, no. My favourite part was being with the sheep. I was one of the people who fed happy the sheep.
It sounds like you've had loads of fun, but what have you found out that you didn't know before today?
There's loads of different types of deers, and the antlers fall off every year.
We got to also hold them, like you could see, they're like individual spots where